Apex Bank in Zimbabwe has approved a payment of $1.2 billion in legacy debt, but rejected claims for a further $861 million as the nation battles the twin effects of currency depreciation and a crippling shortage of foreign currency. Zimbabwe's Reserve Bank said the settlement of the verified foreign debt will be amortized over an extended period, with forex-denominated savings bonds being issued to some of the creditors. Southern African nation owes foreign entities, including airlines and fuel and grain suppliers. Senior government officials say they will ask creditors to take a cut on some of the debts. Good luck with that, to save on the much-needed foreign currency. To also staying in Southern Africa, we move now to the South African rand. And South Africa has, the rand actually weakened and bond yields actually rose after Moody's lowered its forecasts for economic growth, raising the risk that the country may lose its last investment level credit rating. The rand declined by as much as 0.7% to trade above 15 per dollar for the first time in a week. Yields on its benchmark 2030 government bonds rose 4 basis points to 8.9%. Moody's, which is scheduled to review South Africa's Baa3 credit rating in March, said the country's lackluster economic performance was due to domestic challenges rather than external factors, such as the coronavirus. A downgrade by Moody's will see South Africa lose its place in investment-grade indexes, sparking outflows from its bond and stock markets. Is that going to happen? We're going to speak with the CEO of Alpha African Advisory, Mrs. Sanyade Okoli. She's with me now in the studio to talk about this. All things South Africa, all things Zimbabwe. You're welcome to the show, ma'am. Welcome, welcome. For those that don't know, exactly what is Moody's?
Okay, Moodys is essentially one of the top 3 global ratings companies that looks at nations and looks at companies, etc., and determine how essentially the level of risk associated with that country, which is investors use to judge, lending and investing in instruments from those countries or companies in general.
In general.
Yes.
Okay, so was that my broadcast before introducing, was that accurate? Why have they taken this decision on South Africa?
Well, it's not really coming as a surprise.
Okay.
The reality is, over the weeks and months we've been talking about it, South Africa is facing what you call a perfect storm, with lots of different issues arising at the same time. Eskom is one, the whole power situation and the effect that's had, in sectors such as the mining sector and the manufacturing sector. We have the issues with the airlines, which must have an impact on tourism, unemployment rates have been going up, et cetera, et cetera. And we also saw the impact that that had on the retail sector, with the likes of Massmart beginning to shut down some of their retail outlets. So all in all, that speaks to growth not being what it ought to be for a country such as South Africa. So as I said, it really is not a surprise. I think what would have been surprising if they had given a different outlook.
Okay. So if that's not surprising, then I guess what about the impacts this is possibly going to have on South Africa's economy with Moody's decision on their ratings?
The biggest impact relates to what this means. They're supposed to be doing another review of the rating in March. I think there's going to be a budget speech next week, and then they're going to do that review. And if it does face a downgrade, then South Africa finds itself in the position where it loses its place in the investment grade index, which then means, it'll be termed, its instruments will be termed junk. So you're going to have a whole lot of investors coming out, etc. But some analysts argue that we've seen the yields on bonds go up and equities suffer, that investors are already pricing in this potential eventuality.
Okay, so as far as the man at the center of this storm, this perfect storm, President Ramaphosa, he had a State of the Union address, was very dramatic. There's all kinds of protests and stuff like that. What was your take on his speech? Were any takeaways there for you, as far as addressing the country, because he's got so much to deal with? What was your takeaway from his State of the Union address?
I think for me, one of the key things was what he said about Eskom, that they were actually going to take a position so that Eskom no longer has this essentially monopolistic status when it comes to power. And at the mining indaba in January, actually, one of the ministers had said that, look, they're going to allow others to generate power. I think more and more our governments, our leaders need to really accept the realities of our situation and solve for tomorrow. Quite often, we look at what has happened in the past, what government, say for example, take Nigeria, and we're trying to set up a new pension law or whatever.
Yes.
We go and look at what has been done in another country at another time to try and determine our rules for today. Now, there are two issues with that. One is when those systems and frameworks were being built, they were being built in a different context. Okay. The issues that were prevailing that made them arrive at the solution they arrived at,
yes,
is different from the peculiarities of the issues we'll be facing here in Nigeria or in South Africa, etc. So that's one issue.
Right.
The second issue is the fact that they're looking at solutions that were created for time past, not for today and tomorrow. So increasingly, we're going to have to say, what are our current realities? And begin to develop our own solutions to our own problems that are in place today, and solutions that are fit for the tomorrow that we see for our own countries.
Now, speaking of tomorrow, with all the headwinds that South Africa is facing, right? Eskom, South African Airlines, unemployment, there's a whole... Are there darker days ahead, or with what because I don't, this is good advice you've given, but we don't know if he's going to follow it with his ministers. How do you see things in the near to long term? I mean, it's because it looks like things are just getting worse.
So I'll be the first to admit that I'm always careful about my words and not speaking negative things that end up, materializing.
Yeah.
I think the way to respond to that is, what are the steps that need to be taken now to ensure that we don't have darker days? The reality is, with different things going on locally, regionally, and internationally, the leaders do have a difficult job. But it is what it is. They need to grasp the nettle and say, okay, what do I need to ensure that we don't keep going backwards?
I do wish President Ramaphosa and South Africa the best of luck. Let's move to Zimbabwe really quickly now. Their legacy debt, what has helped us with that? That's historical debts?
It's essentially historical debt that has been built up over a period of time. In total, it's in excess of 2 billion. It's, we're talking about aviation, we're talking about grains, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And as we know, Zimbabwe has not been in an easy position.
I think they're worse than South Africa.
Well, but again,
I think Zimbabwe...
But it's another example of, the old adage when we were growing up, a stitch in time saves 9.
Right.
Really, we all need to hold on to that.
Right.
But they're trying to face their reality and say, okay, we have this level of debt. They have a serious shortage in foreign currency. So they're not in the position to be able to address all the debt issues they have today.
Right.
Thus, them looking at speaking to creditors to say, look, we need you to take a haircut. And then also reviewing the debts to make sure that, of course, they are credible, they are legitimate, and begin to prioritize. Okay,
so thanks for mentioning prioritize. Where on earth do they get the money to pay this off? Because, I've been following, Zimbabwe is really bad. The droughts from, September of 2018 going into May of 2019, the hunger crisis, the forex shortages, the doctor strikes, the poverty levels, the United Nations saying that they're facing 5 million people are going to... I was surprised when I saw this news that, you want to pay off debt now? I mean, where...
So here's my perspective.
Okay.
For a lot of countries, this applies to Zimbabwe and so many other countries. We could keep talking about growth. Now, the reason why economic growth is so important is because population is growing. And if the economy doesn't grow as fast as the population, we're essentially having an erosion in per capita income.
Right.
Essentially, we're getting poorer, which is what nobody wants. So we need faster growth. How do you get growth? Investments. How do you get investments? Making sure you have an environment that can attract investment.
Okay.
And we've also got to always remember that there's always there's always competition for capital. So we can't behave as if we think capital will flow to us no matter what happens. We've got to think of it as, actually, there's a shortage of capital, I've got to compete, and I've got to make my systems, my laws, my policies as attractive as possible to attract as much of the investment I require to make my economy grow.
Okay, we've got less than 2 minutes, but I guess I'm throwing the same question about South Africa to Zimbabwe. Is there a way forward for them? Because, yeah.
I just told you what, I think, what I think the way forward is.
Okay.
It's really about attracting investment.
Yes.
To attract investment, things like inflation rates.
As bad as things are over there.
Well, what other ways?
Right.
If you don't grow, and you're not going, another thing I think we're quite guilty of is we don't spend enough of our income reinvesting. So, we're talking about, ESCOM, agent facilities, this, I was reading something about Zimbabwe, the manufacturing sector, really in a difficult position,
Right.
Steel companies shut down for 15 years, which is having knock-on effects on other.
Everywhere else.
We need to realize that we need to reinvest more of the income that comes into our companies and our countries. Otherwise, we will end up in a decline.
Sanyade Okoli, the head of Alpha Africa Capital, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts on what's happening in the southern region of Africa and their issues. Thank you so much.